next lecturer, and I think most of you know, Dr. Abdallah Rothman. His lecture will be about Tarbiyyah and Futuwwa, the application of Islamic psychology within Islamic education. Dr. Abdallah is the principal of Cambridge Muslim College, also one of those who established the IP diploma program at Cambridge. Me, myself, and several colleagues here have studied this very impressive program, and we benefited a lot from it. Dr. Abdallah is also founder of Shifa Integrated Counseling, a co-founder and executive director of the International Association of Islamic Psychology, IAIP, and works within the intersection of Islamic spirituality and mental health practice. And there's a lot of other things we can say. We're honored to be at Zaim University today. Here is where Professor Malik Bedri worked. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all of our efforts, all of us here, as a sadaqah jariyah to Professor Bedri. And Dr. Abdallah was a close student and colleague of Professor Bedri. And without any further ado, I'll let you introduce also in Turkish. We are very honored to also have Dr. Abdallah as part of ISIP's advisory board. Sister, feel free to translate in Turkish, and then we will welcome Dr. Abdallah to the stage.
Öncelikle küçük bir duyurumuz var. Yemek molasını birazcık kısaltacağız. Bu yemek molasından önceki son seminerimiz. Ama yine gerekli vakit olacak yemek için. Şimdi şu anki seminerimizde Dr. Abdallah Rothman'ı karşılıyoruz. Kendisi hakkında biraz bilgi verecek olursak, kendisi Uluslararası İslam Psikolojisi Derneği'nin icra direktörü, İslami maneviyat ve zihinsel sağlığın uygulamalarının kesişim noktasında çalışmaktadır. Lisanslı profesyonel danışman ve kurul sertifikalı kayıtlı sanat terapistidir. Amerika Birleşik Devletleri'nde lisanslıdır ve şu anda yurt dışında BA'da yaşamaktadır. Pardon, ben kısaltmayı okudum direkt. İslam psikoloji alanında Profesör Malik Bedri'nin öğrencisidir ve akademik eğitimine ek olarak İslam dünyasında bir dizi geleneksel İslam alimiyle özel olarak çalışmıştır. Kendisini zaten Cambridge Muslim College'den tanıyorsunuzdur. Bugün bize Tarbiye ve Fütüvvet, İslami eğitimde İslamic psikolojinin uygulanması başlıklı bir konuşma yapacak. Kendisini sahneye çoktan davet etmiş olduk. İyi seminerler.
So without further ado, a round of applause to Dr. Abdallah. Welcome.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. I'm not as humble as my colleagues, so I won't refute the introduction. But I will ask you to stand up because I feel like we've been sitting a long time and I feel bad asking you to listen to me for another 20 minutes without stretching. Okay, hopefully that will suffice for another 15, 20 minutes. But so I think also it's appropriate that we stand and stretch because I want to talk about the embodiment of the application of Islamic psychology in a little bit of different way. I usually talk about clinical applications and counseling, but I think something that's really important is understanding the application of Islamic psychology principles and concepts into, for example, education, and I'll talk about specifically Islamic education, but that, so Dr. Yusuf talked about real knowledge and how the only real knowledge is when we have experiential knowledge. And he also talked about how in this process of going through Safa and Marwa is when we come up against what we need to work through, and that is through an experiential reality of movement, embodiment, right? Literally with our bodies, running through life, going through things, development. And so I want to talk about Tarbiyya and Futuwwa as two principles and concepts that are methods of applying Islamic psychology principles in many things, but specifically in education. And I'll talk about Islamic education because I think it is really important that we don't separate this notion of Islamic psychology, even from a therapeutic standpoint, to just be clinical, just be when we have problems, because really we all have problems. We are here in this life as a problem that we need to sort out. Our work in this life is about developing from what Dr. Rajab often says, developing from what we are to what we can become, maximizing our potential, but we have to do that through working through the things that have accumulated that encrust our potential. And just talking about theory and just talking about application in a clinical sort of setting isn't enough. We need to be embodying and embedding this approach in our lives, because in our lives is where we come up against our stuff. The therapy room is where you work it out, you understand it, and then you go out into life to enact it, to come up against it, to work through it. And so this needs to be incorporated into education. So I'll talk about, sort of as a case study, my work at Cambridge Muslim College, and specifically focus on aspects of khidmah and experiential learning, sort of as the Tarbiyya aspect, and I'll define that in a moment. And then Sunnah disciplines, so things like I'm saying Sunnah disciplines, sometimes they're referred to as Sunnah sports. Specifically, I'll focus on archery and martial arts and this embodied way of implementing therapeutic applications of Islamic psychology principles. So Tarbiyya is, in its meaning, it's to increase or to nurture or to rear, grow, develop. It's about development and training. And it is not just education. Traditionally, we had ta'lim and tarbiyya. This was together. So ta'lim meaning we study, we learn, we study the books, we study Quran, we understand what scholars have said, we ingest this information, and then we implement it through development of our being. So how does that knowledge then apply to how it's going to change our way of being? So changing the state of our heart. The knowledge should illuminate the heart. And so that has to happen through training. So usually when you would go to study with a traditional sheikh, when I went to study with my teachers, I thought I was going to be sitting there and studying from books, but it was through doing life. It was through building things. It was through serving people. It was through being in the community. It was through developing my being and developing my character by witnessing and following and being mentored by somebody like Dr. Human talked about. It's necessity to be mentored by somebody in this process of development. And then Futuwwa, which I think technically means like youth, and it's often talked about as chivalry, but it's been traditionally in our Islamic history, it has been understood as this communal moral code for developing virtue and character through action, like through actually being involved in this. So there would be guilds of Futuwwa, and oftentimes this would be around developing a craft or developing skills of archery and martial arts and horse riding, and not just as exercise, not just as sports, but as spiritual disciplines that embody moral character in embodying virtues and character. So also Dr. Huma was talking about the work of character development and how that's really synonymous with what Dr. Yusuf was talking about, is working through our bala, our trials and difficulties. It's not just how do we perfect ourselves as insan kamil, but how do we understand that the things that are not shining our beautiful character that is in our potential are things that have gotten in the way, where we have covered over from our experience of separation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we just do these things through mental exercises of understanding, it's not enough, because we are embodied human beings. And so this traditional approach to Tarbiyya and this idea of Futuwwa was to embody these principles of wholeness and health and character development that you can say really is an application of Islamic psychology, because it is the therapeutic development of the human being, which we are all a part of this project of development. We can't say that any of us don't have something to work on. And so when we are educating about Islam, at Cambridge Muslim College, we have a bachelor's in Islamic studies, and we talk about we're doing Islamic education. And what I often say is that what we're trying to do is not just have the Islam be what we're educating about, but that the approach to education is fundamentally Islamic. So that it's not just content, right? It's not just ta'lim, it's tarbiyya. And so the way with which we work with the students is towards an embodiment of being rather than just a retaining information. So it's more about, it is about information. There's a lot to learn. They study kalam, they study fiqh, they study Quran and hadith, but it's also about transformation. Not just information, but transformation. And so we have a 3-year BA. We have other programs. We have a diploma in Islamic psychology, which some of the people here have participated in, alhamdulillah. But we have our signature program is a 3-year residential program in Islamic studies. A very rigorous, intensive program, academic, and following a traditional syllabus of Islamic studies. But the reason why it's mandated that they live residential is because it's not just about the study of the books. They're living and learning and eating together, being together, and through this aspect of suhbah with one another and with their mentors and teachers, outside of the classroom is where a lot of the learning happens and a lot of the healing happens. And so it's balancing this study of books with being, learning how to, okay, now that you have this knowledge, how are you going to embody it? Like I said, ta'lim and tarbiyya. And so I have put into place a development program with these students, being that my background is in psychology, specifically Islamic psychology, and they are students of ilm. And how are we going to expect them to be scholars and representing knowledge if they don't have experiential knowledge themselves, which means having to actually work through their own difficulties and struggles by training themselves, or us training them. So one of the aspects that we do is khidmah. We have a routine, we have a roster that they rotate through where they have to wash dishes in the kitchen. They have a responsibility of cleaning up in the college because they live there. It's a sense of community, but it's a sense of service. As well as, I have a little video here just to show that there's no sound, so we don't have to worry about it. But we have them doing work in the garden, physical work, right? And as they're doing this physical work, we're connecting with some of the principles that we be talking about. There's a physicality, and I get in there and help them too, because as we're saying the model, it's about mentoring, a model of mentorship, that having to embody this and practice it. And so here, they're building beds for an herb garden that I'll show you on the next slide. But so it's the, you can go to the next slide, yeah. So it's really this notion in Islamic psychology of purifying the nafs. It's purifying the nafs through service. Oftentimes our nafs becomes about ana, I, right? And it's about how when we focus on ourselves, we can, even when we're trying to work out our own problems, we can get inundated with our own inner world. By making it external, engaging with other people and being in service, This is a way of getting beyond the nafs, and it is purifying just by being in service, because it is what it is enacting and experientially enabling or embodying this state of ubudiyyah, of becoming an abd, Allah, of being somebody who is in service of Allah rather than in service of the self. But that can only go so far just understanding it. It has to be put into action. And so this is really developing character through these actions of service is critical for having that real knowledge. We can study for years and years and read every book about akhlaq, but if you're not actually going through the process of what does it mean when my nafs come up against, like, oh, this person is getting in my way, or I'm annoyed with them. How do I work through that in relationship, in service? And so these acts of khidmah are not just free labor for the college, but they're for the benefit of the students in developing themselves. And then experiential learning is actually not just being classroom-based, but being outside, seeing things hands-on. So those beds that you may notice some people here in these pictures. So these aren't the BA students this time, but this is the best, this is the footage I could find. But so the beds that the BA students built will have these herbs growing that we teach in classes on hikmah and Islamic medicine. And actually, instead of just reading it in the books, to actually see the plants growing, touch them, being able to learn how to make preparations from this wisdom that is in our tradition is a whole different level of learning that awakens this embodied development. So it's hands-on experience, real-world application of knowledge. So you're seeing things in action, it comes to life. This is how we come to have real knowledge. And it's this holistic integration that when you use your body in the process of knowledge development, you are enacting your will, and there is a more holistic enactment of the change, the process of change and the mechanisms of change that are integrating your nafs, aql, qalb, ruh, because this is all embodied in your physical being. And so we have to be engaging full circle, the whole human being in development. And then Sunnah disciplines, the reason we call them Sunnah disciplines and not Sunnah sports, although there's nothing wrong with calling it Sunnah sports, but oftentimes we think of sports as pastimes that are for fun. And you can certainly have fun doing it, but there is a discipline aspect of these things. And the reason why the Prophet ﷺ recommended things like archery, swimming, wrestling, and horse riding is because each of them have specific somatic effects on the development of the human being. So, play another. You might see some more people that you recognize. You can look around and see if you can spot them in the audience. So they're learning, we also do this with the BA students, learning archery. Yes, it's connecting to the Sunnah because the Prophet ﷺ told us to do this, but when you are, so if you notice when they're stretching, you're stretching your body out, there is a somatic experience of release in the body that aligns in order to shoot an arrow, you have to have your posture straight. You have to be connected to breath. You're stretching. There's a release of what we store tension in our body. We store trauma in our body. So when the Prophet ﷺ, when they came from the battle, he told them to go practice archery. Why? Because they were traumatized in war, and by doing this practice, they're focused. They have something that their will is focused on, where it enacts this sense of what do I have control over versus what does Allah have control over. I have control over my posture, my form, my aim, following through, but then once I let go of the arrow, it's in Allah's hands what happens to it. And so what does this do? We can talk all day about aqeedah, and that can be really abstract. What is mine and what is in Allah's hands? But when we embody it, this starts to put everything in order. So it's this spiritual impact of physical discipline. And so these disciplines is what I'm talking about. It's not just disciplining the body and the mind, but disciplining the nafs. And the last thing I want to talk about is martial arts. I know that usually, you know, the Prophet ﷺ talked about grappling or wrestling, but also they were on the field, the battlefield, they were training to be physically active in battle, not just wrestling, but in all of these different types of martial arts, sword, archery, being able to fight standing up, right? And yes, it was a function of the time of needing to be in protection of themselves and community, but the practice of martial arts discipline aligns somebody's mind, body, and soul to be mastering the body, right? So it's mastering the mind and the body, having, oh, sorry, I'll skip here and then I'll go back. It's discipline, no. Self-discipline, having conscious awareness of my personal boundaries and space is going to enact an understanding of who am I, what is my nafs, rather than it being an abstraction. I'm able to embody these principles of Islamic psychology of integration. And engaging in a strategic interaction with the other, with another person, is fundamental to how we come up against and work through our issues and our difficulties and our, sorting out what we need to purify in our nafs is oftentimes reflected in the other. And so by engaging in this strategic dialogue in martial arts, it enacts and embodies this in a way that abstraction and reading and understanding cannot do. And this level of, through this discipline, pushing one's limits and maximizing your potential is the project that we're here to do, right? We're not just meant to coast, right? We're supposed to develop. Tarbiyya is to become something that we have as potential. And the only way we can do that, as Dr. Yusuf was saying, is to be willing to deal with difficulty, to push ourselves up against where the resistance is. So I'll just end with this last thing. Yeah, we could play that. So you can see, I get in there as well. I don't always just wear a suit and tie and give lectures. It's actually embodying this and being an example as well. But so all of these strategic, walking through strategic movements of the body help you learn how to deal with difficulty in life. How am I going to deal with when this thing comes to me in life? How am I going to manage it and deal with it when you're using your body in an embodied way to align your whole being into solving these problems? It makes more sense in your life later on when you're dealing with difficulties. We can get off that. All right. I'm going to end there because I think I'm out of time. But Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah, Dr. Abdallah Rothman. It's truly been an honor, I think I can say, for me and many other students to be a student of yours, of Dr. Jaha, and also of Dr. Human. I really recommend all of you to do the CMC program and the TIIP level 1 and level 2. It's amazing.
You can speak for both.
Yeah, I can speak for both. I've done both. So I really enjoyed and learned so much. So I say people send information about 2 programs. It's on our website as well. We want to give you a gift, Dr. Abdallah, as well, from Sister Fatima.